in Acts chapter 15, and verse 21, the brethren again instructing the early Gentiles coming into the church. One of the things they should abstain from, strangled meat, things offered to idols, that they do not come entangled with idol worship. Moses of old time had in every city them that preach him, being read in the synagogue every Sabbath day. See, these men, they're going back to the past. They're looking back to understand the way things are and the way things should be as the Gentiles come into the church. And they want to take examples from the past. We're better to go. Stay in Acts chapter 9 and verse 15. At Paul's conversion, you know, Paul was not a follower of Jesus. Paul was not a disciple of Jesus. He was not with Peter and James and these men in the beginning of the church. On the day of Pentecost, Paul was nowhere around. In fact, when we read in chapter 7, 8, we see Paul persecuting the church. But this is what the Lord said. Go thy way, for he is a chosen vessel, speaking to Ananias, to bear my name before the Gentiles and kings and the children of Israel. Paul's mission, as the Lord had called him, was to go to the nations and preach. Well, did Paul honor this day as well? Did Paul recognize the seventh day of the week as the Sabbath? Here's a man that was not a follower of Jesus. Did he preach the same thing? Did he preach the Sabbath? Chapter 13 of Acts. Verse 14. And when they departed from Perga, they came to Antioch in Pisidia, and went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and sat down. Verse 42. And when the Jews were gone out of the synagogue, the Gentiles besought that these words might be preached to them the next Sabbath. The Gentiles. Okay? You know who the Gentiles are? The nations outside of Israel. The Gentile nations. So you have Israel, the Jews, and the Gentiles. So if you're not an Israelite, you're a Gentile. And if you're not a Gentile, you're a church of God. It's that simple. 3 nations. The third one was born after. So we have Israel, the Gentiles. Paul was sent to the Gentiles. He preached on the Sabbath. The next Sabbath, they wanted him to come back. Verse 44. And the next Sabbath day came almost the whole city together to hear the word of God. Paul was not preaching a different Sabbath. Paul kept the Sabbath. Paul preached the Sabbath to the Gentiles. The Gentiles did not ask him, hey, come and preach in our temple on Sunday, the first day of the week. No, sir. As the Gentiles received this message, they were taught to keep the Sabbath and to keep it holy. Chapter 16 and verse 13. And on the Sabbath day, he went out of the city by the riverside, where prayer was wont to be made. And we sat down and spake unto the women which besought thither. There are some sisters who wanted to hear the word of God, who preached the word of God, who believed in the gospel that the church preached, that Paul and Barnabas and these men taught. And they went and they preached them on the Sabbath. There's only one day in scriptures that is recognized as the Sabbath. One day. You can pick out a few days in the New Testament where the first day of the week is mentioned, and you will find either Christ's resurrection, the visits to the tomb, or you read in Acts and other places around there where they had collection on the first day of the week. And there was a time when Paul did preach that Sunday night, so much it was late into the night. Well, that would be, according to the Jews, that would be Monday night, because sunset. So when it mentioned they preach here Sunday well into the night, Paul went from Sunday to Monday, the night part of that day. You see, the night is the first part of a day. Go back to Genesis. It's simple. It is simple to track. It is so easy to find out the day that God sanctified and blessed for holy purposes. I really don't need to show you all the scriptures. I don't. It is before us. We can track it. Look up Sunday, see what you find. Look up the Sabbath. Look up the Sabbath. And you'll see the people that honor God by keeping the Sabbath. And I'm not saying keeping the Sabbath is enough in one's life. I'm not going to say that. Not now, not ever. We all know that's just one of the things we ought to do, and one of the things we ought to keep in obedience to God. He is the one that said it so.